And so I'm here talking with Jennifer Foy. Jennifer and I have known each other for now many years, and I have interviewed her several times about the placement of refugees within the United States. Her position in world relief has changed from when I first met her. And so, Jennifer, if you can kind of introduce yourself a little bit more and then talk about where you have been and where you are now regarding world relief.
Yeah, so, Jennifer Foy, and I started out in North Carolina as a volunteer with World Relief in 2007. Started working as an employee around 2014, eventually becoming the office director of the High Point, Winston-Salem locations. And then about a year and a half ago, I moved to Baltimore and became vice president of U.S. programs. So I oversee all of the refugee and immigrant programming for World Relief domestically.
That's a big job. How many other organizations do you work with in placing refugees in the United States?
So there's 9 resettlement agencies.
Right, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah. So we work with all of them. We partner with them, along with a lot of other refugee-related organizations, and primarily through an organization called RCUSA, Refugee Council USA. It's kind of the hub for all of us. We use that for advocacy, to share information, but as a way for us all to work together, because we have the same goals, the same desires to welcome people into the country, to provide a safe and healthy alternative to a refugee camp.
Right. So the next 6 months, I'm imagining, look very different from the last 6 months. We are now looking forward to a Biden presidency, and the press has made light of they've described what they foresee as some of the biggest differences between how President Trump has handled immigration and how President Biden will. And that relates to you specifically in terms of the flow of refugees coming into the United States. And I know under Trump, the flow of refugees has slowed dramatically, almost to a standstill. But in the next 6 months, it seems like the faucet will be turned back on. So describe to me, what that looks like to you in the next 6 months or 12 months.
Yeah, over the last 4 years, we've just seen a nonstop attack on the systems that have allowed the refugee program to exist in the United States. And so a great way to show that is that we have about half of the staff that we did 4 years ago at this time. And so in order to get to the place that Biden wants us to be, welcoming over 100,000 people a year, we have to rebuild those systems, both as a country in the State Department, but in our offices. All the agencies closed offices, so we're going to be reopening or starting new offices, and then hiring and training the staff that we need back to manage and help welcome people in and meet all the federal requirements, not to mention our own.
Right. I can imagine the human resource a part of this being very challenging to hire and train appropriate personnel to do, as you say, welcome the refugees in and help them through the first very critical steps. So yeah, rolling up those shirt sleeves, I think it's going to be very important. And so in terms of community partnerships, I know that 4 years ago, the whole sector, all 9 of the organizations that had placing refugees had very good working relationships with community organizations that helped facilitate the integration of refugees into the local community. Is that going to be a challenge as well? Just kind of re-energizing those connections?
It is because we've seen things like Trump's attempt to require consent, to where every state gets to decide whether or not refugees are allowed there, which has continued to divide things. So you have offices in states that, if that executive order had been able to continue as policy, you have states that have said we don't want refugees, but there are refugees there and there are offices there still. So they're entering or rebuilding in a known hostile environment. An example for us as an agency, World Relief does a lot through churches, helping pull those groups and communities together to serve others as they enter the community. But even, politics has created such a divide in the country where faith communities that used to be united in this now are dividing on political lines. And so part of our job isn't just going to be gathering some volunteers. It's going to be helping to heal some of those divides so that the communities can come together again to serve.
Right, and so that jumps right to my last question, was what was regarding the kind of the political atmosphere, the more polarized political atmosphere, and the I guess challenging is too neutral a word, but the very in some cases toxic atmosphere into which some refugees might be placed, and so I think dealing with the community partners to support them and have them support your organizations, your offices, to be a watchdog for possible threats and be just aware of some of the unfortunate marginalization that refugees might have in communities. So there's challenges coming up, I guess. How would you kind of summarize, just in one sentence or two sentences, how would you summarize the difference between the Trump-Miller philosophy regarding refugee placement and what you perceive as to be the Biden philosophy with refugee placement?
Well, I think we know the Trump-Stephen Miller version is a very nationalistic, insulatory, let's take care of everything here and keep everyone else out, unless they have money. Where Biden is much more wanting to take that lead place in the world of saying, we recognize there are people suffering and we want to offer help. We are a country of immigrants. We want to honor that history and that position and continue to be a country of immigrants. And part of that is welcoming refugees and others into the country. Biden is very focused on security and making sure that that process is safe, that all of those checks and balances happen, but he's not being controlled by a fear agenda.
Right. So, the future looks different under Biden.
Yeah.
And this is an unfair question, but I know you'll be able to handle it. You're speaking in front of community leaders in wherever, High Point, say, High Point, North Carolina. And just off the top of your head, the impact of refugees on communities in terms of crime rate, in terms of community involvement, and so on. I think there's a gap between what some people have a stereotypical vision and what the reality is. And so if you can kind of describe to people in a community what they're going to be welcoming, what impact will this have on our community to absorb maybe thousands of refugees? Are things going to get worse? Are they going to get better? Tell me about that.
Overall it gets better. They provide diversity. Immigrants are a significant portion of new entrepreneurs in our country. They start new businesses and bring new things in at a much higher rate than Americans do, because Americans get very focused on a career and heading down a path where most immigrants come in with a dream of owning something of their own, something they haven't been able to do in their past. Refugees across the board have lower rates of crime, lower rates of imprisonment, all of those things. So, there will always be a case here and there, but in general, it's adding safety. It's adding just some beautiful culture to what we have. I know you gave the example of High Point, but grocery stores and restaurants and music and different things that community hasn't had comes through in those new arrivals and those new neighbors. So it's exciting to see what they bring and how they share their culture and begin to blend into the communities.
Right. And so I guess one last question for this video segment is, I know that World Relief is a faith-based organization, and I guess can you give us just a couple thoughts on how this speaks to people who call themselves Christians, and how this fits into how accepting refugees may fit into what you would describe as a Christian philosophy?
Yeah, so throughout the Bible, there's dozens of places where Christians are called to welcome the stranger or the sojourner or the alien in their land. And so that's interpreted differently by lots of people. As with anything, it can be interpreted to fit the need that you have at the moment. But we see it as we're called to love our neighbors, to welcome them, and to serve those that are vulnerable. And so this is our way of calling the church and offering them an opportunity to do that. And so our goal is to really come into partnership with churches and say, this is part of our calling as Christians and a way to serve. Let us help open the doors for you to that and give you that opportunity and walk alongside them in a healthy way.
Right. And so what I'm hearing you say, Jennifer, and correct me, please, but what I'm hearing you say is that your interpretation of the Christian imperative overlaps almost completely with the humanitarian imperative.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
You've got it.
Well, and as I write about, think about, and teach about the humanitarian imperative, sometimes I run into people that see those as maybe contradictory worldviews, and I think what you're articulating is that they're very much overlapping worldviews.
Yeah, I think it's about motivation.
Sure.
Whether it's altruistic or connected to your faith or what it is, it's the same thing.
The same thing, and again, rephrase me if appropriate, but the humanitarian imperative is having the right to work toward the dignity of all, and to partner with those who are working toward dignity for all, and that means listening to everyone who has been marginalized, and hearing their voices, and responding to what their needs are, and helping to facilitate pathways toward dignity.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what you all do in World Relief. Is that's what you're all about. You are you're taking lists of names that have been vetted by the UN and then vetted by the U.S. State Department. You're taking those list of names and turning those names into real people, real families, and you're connecting them to street addresses and schools and places of employment and places of worship. So yeah, you are the the one that facilitates those pathways. So, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's a really beautiful thing to see, and all those dividing lines that we see in the country. When you see a Christian church and a mosque come together, working together, it's not what you see on the news, but on the streets in our community, it's what happens. And it's because they recognize the value of caring for one another, and that these new neighbors coming into our communities have intrinsic value. Right. And that comes just by being human. And so they all step in to serve and help. And nothing better than that.
Right. So what I'd love to do is have another conversation in 6 months to see how all this has played out.
To see if my hair goes fully gray. Is that what you're saying?
Well, exactly. I think this is, in some ways, this is a extraordinarily difficult time with COVID. Everything is compromised in all kinds of ways. But this is a ray of hope for a moment that I think is going to, and you're going to be part of it, is going to unfold in the coming months, where people that maybe have been waiting in queue for years,
decades,
are going to be re-vetted and finally will get on a plane from who knows where, perhaps from Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, perhaps from a refugee camp in Syria or Yemen, and will end up in the United States and have this amazingly transformative experience and add value to our culture at the same time. So yeah, the next 6 months could be exciting, and I know, both of us know that for some people around the world, this is the most incredible thing that could ever happen to them, to have safety, freedom, and opportunity to create a new life. All of that said, these people are leaving their homelands, which I think all of us could benefit from, really appreciating that and understanding that, how difficult it is to leave a homeland, albeit a dangerous one, to leave a homeland and to leave a home language and to leave a home culture and to try to reestablish oneself. So their journey is exciting, but immeasurably difficult, I think. Am I saying that?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what it is picking someone up from halfway around the world, dropping them in whatever community here in the U.S. and by government standards saying, here, let me give you $1,000. That needs to last you for 3 months. And by the end of that 3 months, we need you to have a job, speak the language, and be on your own in the community. And that's the expectation at the government level, which is ridiculous, which is why these 9 agencies all step in and come alongside. And in our case, we bring the churches in to step alongside people, because there's no way. I mean, $1,000 isn't going to get you past the first month, much less 3 months. So the only way this works is with the community.
Right. Well, I am one of many people who absolutely deeply appreciate what you are doing at World Relief and all of the other entities that help place to refugees. So thank you.
Yeah.